And you've just heard Like Coffee by Elsie MacDonald, which is taken from the Pulling at the Common Thread EP. And I'm so pleased to be joined by Elsie now. Hello, Elsie.
Hello.
So before we talk all about the EP, can you talk about that track, Like Coffee? Because I think it's my favourite on it.
Yeah, that one was kind of like I guess at the time I was just trying to write something that felt like a bit cheery because I think a lot of these songs on this EP is like me trying to like take apart my like relationship style and how I interact with people, and I think it was like um yeah, just trying to like look at the sort of idea of a relationship through sort of kind of like cheerier lens. I was trying to go for more of that sort of like 90s Django vibe where you're just a bit twee and like happy with the environment you're in. And at the time, my partner at the time was we were both like really ill all the time. So the like cough sweet bit was just like this was just like the way that we would sort of care for each other is like make coffee and bring cough sweets. And I just thought it was kind of funny to put that in like as a hook there.
Yeah, it's got that kind of idea of a kind of everyday thing that's happening,
Yeah.
but then and musically, that's interesting. You say you wanted to write something more upbeat because I think I'm no musician, but some of the changes in it are like that. You know, they're kind of
Mhm.
swelling that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And like the little jangly guitar parts was that was kind of where like the whole like core of the song for me, that was like as soon as I had those little bits, I was like, this is what I want it to sound like. And it's gonna really sort of more of a fun one for me.
I was wondering why it struck a chord with me, but when you describe it as 90s indie, then yeah, that probably
Yeah.
explains exactly why. And so pulling at the common thread, well, first of all, where's the title taken from?
So yeah, it was kind of this, I had this very odd experience where, so it comes from the title track of the EP, which will be like it was going to be the last song, but I put a wee demo in the end there, so it's going to be the second last song. But this kind of idea of like, I had this someone who like in a personal situation had like a conflict with, and like this person decided that the way to like prove her point was to analyze my song lyrics to like
Right.
prove that I was like a horrible person, which was a very bizarre experience. So it was kind of like this idea of um like the common thread of what I've been talking about, and like in the song pulling at the, which I think will just be called common thread, it's like taking out all of these things that I've said and stitching them into a tapestry of a thing that I don't like. And then I
Mhm.
just thought the kind of imagery there of like this idea of like this kind of folk idea of folk tradition of the common thread in a piece of work, and then like that mirroring with the idea of pulling out these like this essence of a person from their songwriting. I think for with someone like me who's very confessional in my songwriting, I never really thought while I was doing it that anyone was going to look for anything in it. And so I think when that happened, I was a bit like, oh, whoa, I really have just like put everything of my soul into this like stuff, and opened like it was kind of the first time the vulnerability of it all became
Right.
a feature for me. And I was like, oh, right, people really are engaging with this and thinking like, and seeing it as like a manifesto for existence or something.
That's so interesting because yeah, they are obviously personal songs, but when
Mhm.
you started writing them, did you ever consider how people would react to them? I mean, I don't know if you do that as a songwriter.
Not really. I mean, in some circumstances when it's like I'm trying to get a point across to someone, I'm trying to like um but it's all more of a sort of internal processing, or like a kind of mirroring of previous songwriting styles. Like I was writing romantic songs before I had ever been in a romantic relationship, and I think a lot of people do that because we see it as like a language to tell a story about an experience, um and a way of like expressing feelings of isolation or like inability to connect. And so I never really like, obviously it is something that I've always wanted to play in front of people and always wanted it to be something that I shared. And I love the experience of sharing songs and talking about songs with people. But I never really thought that I was like trying to say something to anyone really. I was just kind of expressing how I felt. It was more of a diary to me, I think, than
Yeah.
anything else.
Kind of expressing your own
Yeah.
feelings rather than have someone picking it apart, like
Yeah.
some kind of, dissecting an essay or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a really strong image that you give because, pulling at a thread has that idea of, you just start it, then all sorts
Yeah.
of things can come out of it. But also,
Yeah.
as you say, that kind of common thread, that the commonality of folk music as well, about
Mhm.
expressing something individually that other people can pick up on and empathize with, the
Yeah.
kind of individual speaking to the universal, if you like.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't want to take you through each and every individual song because I think it's only fair that people listen to them themselves and kind of get, their own feelings from them. But there are two I'd like to just kind of mention. The week of election night. What's behind that one?
That was a very specific experience to me, and it's one of those ones where like I don't really feel it has much of a narrative as a song, but it was kind of the exact feelings. I was trying to capture that feeling, the pit in your stomach feeling when you wake up to news, or like somebody you're around is staying up and you're
Mm.
not, and you're kind of like gradually like woken up a few times throughout the night and told like how the election's going. And it was after the what year was the election now that Trump got in the second time? I can't remember. Was it
God,
24?
yeah, it might be, yeah,
I think it was
24. That sounds about right.
2024. Yeah, and I was just like that feeling of waking up in the morning and the kind of dread that you get, trying to express that as a feeling for a political song, because I think a lot of the time with a lot of the protest song that I really enjoy and that I used to write, but I'm not so drawn to writing anymore, is very like ideological or like trying to like make a statement. But I think a lot of how we are experiencing politics as people today is a lot more like gut instinct emotional, and it just feels like we're being pulled in a million different directions by lots of different information. And I think just for me, focusing in on this really small like room, so like everything that's mentioned in that song was just kind of like stuff I was seeing in the minute, like the take the pick, there was like a match on the floor of the room I was in, and it was just like all these ideas of like trying to turn that feeling of dread into something that could be productive. And like that is funny, I have a little regret about the the verse that's Jesus wants you to die. So my mum was very unhappy when she heard this. My mum's a Church of Scotland minister, and I did kind of get her point, because I was trying to take on the voice of the right wing at that point.
Yeah.
I think that I could have maybe did a little bit more to make that not seem like that's what I was saying. But yeah, it's that feeling of like the right trying to bamboozle you, and it works. We are actually a little bit bamboozled about what's going on in politics.
So it was a kind of satirical voice of someone else.
Yeah,
That's so. I was talking to someone just yesterday who's written an album about the end of Empire. The band's called Elgin and the Marbles, and I was asking him about, it's satirical. It's about the state of the nation and all that, but it's
yeah,
satirical. But in these days, it's quite difficult for
yeah,
satire to hit, because how do you satirize what's happening at the moment? It's difficult.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the
Because
other thing that, sorry,
mhm.
Nico.
No, no, I was just saying it's just that like I think it is something that I would acknowledge, that I think I want to be more conscious as a songwriter to make sure that the intent of those things is coming across. That you don't want to venture into Morrissey territory where all your fans are arguing, no, no, he really is a good guy, and then it turns out 20 years later he
Oh, yeah, you've struck a chord there, I have to say. And also the song itself kind of made me reflect upon far too many waking up after
yeah,
elections that have not gone the way you think or hoped they would go. And then you start to think,
yeah.
is it me? Have I got the wrong perspective on this?
It's there's that Proclaimer song. I think it's called, I think it's um Sean, and it's like, or maybe it's not that one, but it's the one that's like Pat votes the Scots way just like her mother, but South always takes all just like her brother. But it's got that bit about what do you do when democracy fails you? And I think it's that sort of sentiment of like, I think there is a sort of feeling, especially in Scotland, where we're constantly being voted against in what we want. And there is that feeling of being anybody who's aiming for anything good, that we're always just losing.
That's a good way of putting it as any. The other song I wanted to bring up, I'm just going to bring up because I think this might make you laugh. You sent me a link to the SoundCloud of it,
Mm.
and on it it says NSHFTAA. And for ages, I was going, "What does that mean? I've no idea." And I was thinking, is it like not safe for work? Or what's it? And then I realised it was a shorter for not sure how far the edges are.
Yes.
So that was just, it took me ages to work out what that was. And then I
Yeah.
was playing and I went, I've heard this before. This isn't new to me. And then I went over and worked out what it was. But yeah, you could, if you stick that on as a song title, people will really
Yeah.
work out what it's been. Now, you've been releasing music for, I think, since 2023. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of. I did a little bit on Bandcamp in like 2020, 2021, but it was
Right.
a very, very early rudimentary songwriting. And I do feel like the 23 stuff is also very kind of early in my stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's about right.
Do you feel like you've changed quite a bit as a singer-songwriter? I think you mentioned maybe doing more protest type of stuff and now maybe more personal.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think the way that I've connected to songwriting, I think it's very common is you start off like very much emulating the people you love. And so I'm a massive Billy Bragg fan, like number one Billy Bragg fan in the like Facebook group for the like small Facebook group of 100 people who are like the biggest Billy Bragg fans kind of level. So I was like obviously very, very inspired by that kind of level of political songwriting. And it was the way that I first engaged with songwriting as a thing. And the first inspiration I got was because of political events.
Yeah.
But then I started to find a place where it sat in my life. And I think you start incorporating other influences and sort of settling into your own musical style that is separate from the like your idols. And I think that's kind of where I found myself now, where it's like it's not apolitical, it's not completely
No.
devoid of the political experience that I have, but I'm less drawn to like writing a protest song as I was, I think.
That's such an interesting comparison because when I first heard your stuff, it did take me back to the early Billy Bragg, Life's a Riot with Spy versus Spy, that kind of period. But then I was also thinking there's a lot of romantic, personal stuff written at that time as well that he did. He really mixed the two.
Yeah, really did.
And well, who are your other influences? I'm eager to know.
Yeah, so I'm really like a lot of what I love at the moment and kind of have grown out of, I guess, sort of the Billy Bragg love is a lot of the Australian kind of like 90s 2000 to 2006 like Candle Records people. So I'm really into this band called the Locksmiths. Not sure if
Right.
you've heard of them. It's very like sort of 9,000 monthly listeners on Spotify type thing. And then there's an Australian folk singer called Darren Hanlon who is a massive influence for my songwriting. And there's this band that I love at the moment called The Maze,
Okay.
who they're coming to Scotland again sometime later this year. But they do this beautiful like harmony work and these just like emotive songs that are yeah, just so lovely to sit in. And that's a lot more like contemporary Australian folk music. But I guess more in the sort of UK sense. I'm trying to think like I'm not sure if you know Grace Petrie. I
Hmm.
was really into Grace Petrie as a that was like I think a big thing that started me writing songs as well was her music. And I did a little bit of work for her, the Fringe that she was here the first time. So yeah, it's that I think that's kind of where a lot of my like personal inspiration to like start writing music. I was like, oh, here's someone who's not an old bloke that's doing it, and I'm like, oh, I could actually do that as well. And that was kind of the
I think Australia's a really interesting place to kind of compare to
Mhm.
Scotland because I stayed there a long, long time ago, but
Mhm.
it always had this strong local, not local, national music scene.
Yeah.
Big radio stations like Triple J, that
Mhm.
really kind of celebrated Australian music. Every year they put out their 100 tracks. It's quite inspirational, and they often feel, although they do go and make success elsewhere, they don't necessarily have to. They
Yeah.
can survive on their own terms in their own
Mhm.
country. I think it's
Yeah.
an interesting comparison, and lots of great music as well.
Yeah, and I think there was definitely a camaraderie in the 90s between the sort of like the Glasgow art school scene and the sort of um Melbourne pop scene. I think those were quite entwined, and a lot of those people were friends with each other and going across either way, and the music isn't that dissimilar either.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about your guitar playing, which I really love? It's kind of finger picked, but also, as you say, kind of jangle. There's lots going on. Do you have particular guitarists, or is it just your style?
Yeah, it does seem to just kind of be my style. I'm not entirely sure where it came from, if I'm being honest. Like, because I started off like all these songs that I was learning to play were all like, kind of campfire busker chord songs. And then I mean, I really got into Dick Gaughan. I think he really changed my perception of guitar playing. And like the way that he accompanies his voice with guitar really, like, I was like, oh, you can be doing a lot more while still leaving room for your voice. And I think that's kind of, and I guess I started experimenting with different tunings, and that's sort of where I got to my like finger picking style and having a lot of droney stuff. So I think it definitely, I think it's like some sort of blend of the folky trad stuff and the jangle pop strumming that like created whatever it is I'm doing now.
And just as we're talking, because you mentioned the Proclaimers earlier, I don't
Mm.
know if they're an influence, but I could see comparisons there.
Yeah, it's kind of, I find it a bit, it feels a bit of a guilty pleasure as a Scottish person to admit, like, for the Proclaimers, like you're admitting to this like twee nationalist identity. But I did like really, for especially during COVID, so I turned 17 in 2020, to put that into perspective, and I like found these Proclaimers album in their back catalogue, and I was like, or I guess maybe it's like their front catalogue, isn't it? Because it's like the old stuff is a lot more famous, but then
Yeah.
there's all this stuff that came after. And I got so obsessed with them, and I was like, listen to all these albums on repeat. And I remember like listening to Let's Hear It for the Dogs, and just like as it finished, just starting it again in my bedroom during COVID. And I like, yeah, it was genuinely the reason I moved to Edinburgh, because it was like a toss up between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And I've
Right.
been listening to all these songs, and that they have this song called Leaving Home.
Yeah.
And so I'm from Dundee originally, and then my parents moved to Northeast Fife. So like 10 minutes away from where the Proclaimers were growing up. And this song about going from that part of the world to Edinburgh, which I know is like an hour train, but it feels like a momentous move. Um, that and they have this bit, this Leith feels like New York, and I just believed them, and so I came.
And particularly the first album, This Is the Story, which was a real
Mm.
groundbreaking thing. People were kind of like, oh, you can sing like that. Oh, you can. But when
Yeah,
you listen to the lyrics and you dig down deep, again, they would have been contemporary with it, early Billy Bragg in the way that they kind of got their
yeah.
music over. There's that lovely mix of the political and the personal
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, I really don't think I had an awareness of how political the Proclaimers were at all until I listened to their music in that era in 2020. And I was like, oh, like, especially later on, there's a lot of like just very explicitly political songs. I'm not sure kind of where they've went, and if I'm not saying right now that I politically align myself with everything the Proclaimers do and say now, but yeah, I think that music was really important to me at that time.
And we haven't spoken about playing live. How much do you
Mm.
enjoy? Something you really enjoy?
Yeah, I think that's the reason that I do it. Like I do love recording as an art form, but like playing to a room of people is just there's something about that experience that I don't really know how to why it's so cathartic. There's something about that feeling of like sharing these things and being in a space that it just any worries or insecurities I have about the idea of being a musician and ideas of success all kind of just don't really matter when I'm in a room with people playing songs. And I think it's just a way that I'm good at getting across what I think and feel to people, maybe more so than conversation. And so it just feels really like I'm at home when I'm playing in front of people.
And I noticed you're going to be playing on May the 1st with someone else who we've had on the show, Callum Baird.
Yeah,
And I
Callum.
can see the connections between the two of you and your music there as well.
Yeah, we became good friends. We were kind of orbiting around each other, we were aware of each other, and then yeah, we just like I think we have a lot of similar music taste, and we kind of just yeah clicked like that.
Yeah, that's, I think, at the Waverley in Edinburgh.
Mhm.
Do you have any other live gigs planned that we could mention?
I'm not sure before the 19th of because I do
Right.
have a gig on the 4th of April, but that'll be before this goes out. So um I think there will be a few things around May. And there's some talks of some other stuff happening after that, but I've not got much concrete in place just
Okay.
now.
Well, if you let me know when they're happening,
Yeah, will
I'll
do.
let the listeners know. And we're about to hear another song from the EP, Pint Glass. And I was wondering again what you could tell us about that. It's another cracker.
Yeah, this was really it's a bit difficult right now because I've like broken up with the person the song's about. But I do still feel it's true, and it was kind of a to me a sort of resolution after this period of conflict to care for people in the way that we can. You know, this it also feels like a very sort of young sort of student-y feeling, that idea of the hook is putting flowers in a pint glass when you don't have a vase, and
Yeah.
it's that feeling of like your kind of 20s and trying to care for all the people around you and not really having much stability or certainty, but you know that you can like get flowers from Tesco and put them in a vase in a pint glass, and it's still like those ways that we make our lives pretty with what we've got.
Yeah, it's a lovely image. Absolutely. I'm sure everyone can relate to it at some point about, you do this as easily and as you can, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elsie, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. You know already that I'm a massive fan of your music, so it's been great to be able to discuss it with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for having me.
And this is Elsie MacDonald and Pint Glass.